The judge's gavel echoed through the silent courtroom. Eleanor Hartfield stood, her voice breaking. "Your Honor, I'm withdrawing our petition." Kate's knees buckled. Ethan caught her as she collapsed. "We won," she whispered, tears streaming. "Ethan, we won." But this story didn't start in a courtroom. It started with 3 frozen children and a man who'd forgotten how to say yes. The sun had not yet broken over the Wyoming mountains when Ethan Blackwood's eyes opened to darkness. 4:30 in the morning, the same time every morning for 8 years. His hand moved instinctively to the other side of the bed, finding only cold sheets where warmth used to be. Rebecca had been gone 8 years, but his body still searched for her in the dark. He sat up slowly, joints protesting the February cold that had seeped through the log walls during the night. The house was silent, too silent, the kind of silence that pressed against your ears until you wanted to scream just to break it. But Ethan didn't scream. He hadn't made a sound that wasn't absolutely necessary and longer than he could remember. His feet found the floor, found his boots. The morning routine unfolded like it always did. Build the fire, make the coffee, stare at the empty chair across from his at the kitchen table. Drink the coffee, black because that's how he'd always taken it, and changing now would feel like admitting something he wasn't ready to admit. 8 years, 8 Wyoming winters that he'd survived. But surviving wasn't the same as living. Ethan knew that. Somewhere deep in the part of himself he'd locked away the night Rebecca died, he knew it. But knowing something and being able to do something about it were 2 very different things. The coffee was bitter and hot. He drank it standing by the window, watching the first gray light touch the peaks of the mountains to the east. Beautiful country, harsh and unforgiving, but beautiful. The kind of beauty that could kill you if you weren't careful. The kind that demanded everything you had and gave back only what you earned. Rebecca had loved these mountains, had stood at this very window every morning with her own cup of coffee, watching the light change, talking about her plans for the day, the garden she wanted to expand, the chickens she wanted to get, the children she hoped they'd have someday. They'd never had children. 8 years of marriage, and Rebecca's body had never quickened with life. It had broken her heart a little more each month, though she'd tried to hide it. Ethan had told her it didn't matter, that she was enough, that they were enough together. He'd meant it too, every word. But now there was nothing. No Rebecca, no children, no future that looked any different from the past. Just him and this ranch, and the work that never ended. He finished his coffee and set the cup in the basin. Time to start. The cattle wouldn't feed themselves. The fences wouldn't repair themselves. And the bank certainly wouldn't pay itself. That last thought made his jaw tighten. The bank. Marcus Cole in his final notice. $2,000 due by the 1st of April or the ranch would be foreclosed. $2,000 he didn't have. $2,000 he had no way of getting unless he could somehow turn this failing operation around in the next 6 weeks. The letter sat on the kitchen table where he'd left it 3 days ago. He hadn't looked at it since first reading it, but he didn't need to. The words were burned into his memory. Final notice. Foreclosure. Failure. Caleb Winslow had left him this ranch. Caleb, the man who'd found a 12-year-old orphan boy begging for scraps outside a general store in Cheyenne and had given him a chance. More than a chance. A life. A future. Everything. And Ethan was going to lose it because he couldn't pull himself together enough to run it properly. Because for 8 years he'd been going through the motions, doing just enough to get by, but never enough to actually thrive. Never enough to honor what Caleb had given him. The anger that rose in his chest was familiar. Anger at himself, anger at fate, anger at God for taking Rebecca when she'd been so young, so full of life. Anger that accomplished nothing but made his hands shake as he pulled on his coat and hat. The cold outside hit him like a fist. February in Wyoming meant temperatures that dropped below zero most nights, wind that cut through layers of wool and leather, like they weren't there snow that could bury a man if he wasn't paying attention. Ethan barely noticed anymore. Cold was just another thing to endure. The barn was dark and smelled of hay and horse and the deep earthy scent of animals in winter. His gelding Ash nickered softly as Ethan approached with grain. The horse was getting old, like everything else on this place. Gray around the muzzle, now stiff in his movements, but still strong, still willing to work. Ethan ran his hand down the horse's neck as he ate, feeling the warmth of him, the solid reality of muscle and bone and breath. Animals didn't lie, didn't pretend, didn't try to make you feel better with empty words. They just were, honest in a way people rarely managed. The morning chores took 2 hours. Feeding, watering, checking the cattle in the near pasture for signs of illness or injury, inspecting the fence line as far as he could see in the growing light. Everything was holding together. Barely, like him. By the time he rode back to the barn, the sun had cleared the mountains and was casting long shadows across the snow. Another day begun, another day to get through. The thought sat heavy in his chest as he unsaddled Ash and rubbed him down. He should go to town, needed supplies, needed to talk to Marcus Cole face to face, try to buy himself more time. Needed to do something other than hide out here on this ranch like a ghost haunting his own life. The decision made itself. He'd go to Silver Ridge, face whatever needed facing. Maybe buy himself a few more weeks to figure out how to save this place. Maybe not, but at least he'd have tried. The ride to town took an hour and a half. Ash picked his way carefully through the snow, breath steaming in the cold air, ears forward. Alert, Ethan let his mind drift as they rode, watching the landscape roll past. Empty country, wild country, the kind of land that made a man feel small and large at the same time. Small because of how vast it all was. Large because surviving here meant something. Silver Ridge appeared gradually. First the outlying buildings, then the main street with its row of wooden structures, the general store, the saloon, the bank, the church. All the things a town needed to call itself civilized, even if civilization was a generous word for this rough collection of people clinging to existence on the edge of nowhere. Ethan tied Ash outside the bank and stood for a moment gathering himself. He'd known Marcus Cole for 15 years. The man wasn't cruel, just practical. Business was business. Money was money. And a ranch that couldn't pay its debts was a risk the bank couldn't afford to take. The bank was warm inside. A fire burned in the stove in the corner. Marcus looked up from his desk as Ethan entered, and something like sympathy crossed his face before he smoothed it away. They talked for 20 minutes. Marcus laid out the situation clearly. The bank had been patient, had given extensions twice already. But patience had limits, and those limits had been reached. $2,000 by April 1st, or foreclosure proceedings would begin. Ethan asked if there was any way to get more time. Marcus shook his head slowly. The decision had come from Denver. The bank couldn't hold a non-performing loan indefinitely. It wasn't personal. It was just business. Just business. The words echoed in Ethan's head as he left the bank and stood on the wooden sidewalk looking at the street without really seeing it. Just business that he was about to lose everything Caleb had given him. Just business that 8 years of grief had brought him to this moment. He needed to go to the general store, get supplies, go home, figure out what the hell he was going to do. The store was across the street and down 2 buildings. He started walking. Grace Dawson's store was the largest in Silver Ridge. She'd run it for 30 years, had seen people come and go, fortunes made and lost. Nothing much surprised her anymore. She looked up when Ethan entered and nodded once, the kind of acknowledgement you gave someone you knew but didn't have much to say to. The store was warm and smelled of wood smoke and coffee and the dry scent of flour and grain. Ethan moved through it mechanically, gathering what he needed. Coffee, salt, bacon, flour, basic things, survival things. That's when he heard it. A child's voice, thin and desperate, cutting through the normal sounds of the store. "Mama, Mama, please. Thomas won't wake up." Ethan froze, turned, saw them for the first time. A woman stood near the counter, thin, too thin. Her coat was patched in a dozen places, her dress beneath it, worn nearly through at the hem. But her face was what stopped him. Not pretty in any conventional way. Harder than that, sharper. The face of someone who'd been through hell and had come out the other side still standing, still fighting. Her hair was dark, pulled back tight from her face. Her eyes were dark too, and terrified. Beside her, a boy of about 10 stood with his arms around a smaller child. 6 years old, maybe. The smaller boy's lips had a blue tinge to them that Ethan recognized. Hypothermia. Not severe, not yet, but getting there. And clinging to the woman's skirt was a little girl. 4 years old at most. Blonde hair matted, enormous blue eyes staring at nothing. 3 children, All of them looked half-starved. All of them looked like they'd been traveling hard for a long time. The woman was talking to Grace Dawson, her voice low and controlled, but with an edge of desperation underneath it that made something twist in Ethan's chest. I need work, any work, boarding for myself and my children. I can cook, clean, mend, anything you need done. Grace's face was sympathetic but firm. You got money? Not much. Then I can't help you, honey. I'm sorry. The woman's jaw tightened. Please, there has to be someone hiring. Anyone. Grace shook her head slowly. Winter's coming down hard. Every ranch in 50 miles already has their help hired on. Nobody's looking for more hands right now. Especially not, she stopped herself, especially not a woman with 3 mouths to feed. The woman finished the sentence flatly without emotion, but Ethan could hear the pain underneath it. I understand. Is there at least somewhere we can get warm, just for an hour? Then we'll move on. Ethan stood with his supplies in his arms, watching this scene unfold, and something was happening inside him that he couldn't name. Something that felt almost like feeling, which was more than he'd experienced in 8 years. The boy with the blue lips swayed slightly, and the older boy tightened his grip, trying to hold him up. The woman saw it and made a small sound that she cut off immediately, but not before Ethan heard the fear in it. He didn't make decisions anymore. Hadn't in years. Just went through the routines that got him from one day to the next. But standing there in Grace Dawson's store, watching this woman try to hold herself together while her child turned blue with cold, something shifted. He set down his supplies and walked to the counter. The woman turned as he approached. Her eyes met his, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Two people who'd been broken in different ways, recognizing something in each other they couldn't have named. Excuse me, Ethan said. His voice came out rougher than he'd intended. Too long since he'd used it for anything but the bare necessities. The woman straightened slightly, her hand moving protectively to the little girl's head. Defensive. Ready for another rejection. Ready to fight if she had to. Grace Dawson was staring at him. Ethan could feel her stare. In 30 years of knowing him, she'd probably never heard him volunteer a word to a stranger. Hell, she'd barely heard him speak to people he knew. Are you hiring? The woman asked him directly. Her chin lifted, her eyes challenging him to say no, so she could move on to the next impossible thing. Ethan looked at her, at the 3 children, at the desperation she was trying so hard to hide, and thought about the letter on his kitchen table. The failing ranch. The empty house, the silence that had nearly killed him over the past 8 years. He thought about Caleb Winslow finding a 12-year-old boy outside a general store in Cheyenne 26 years ago, stopping when he had every reason to keep walking, asking a single question that had changed everything. Boy, you want to work? No, Ethan said, because that was the truth. He wasn't looking for help. Didn't want anyone on his ranch in his space disturbing the careful balance he'd built between surviving and giving up. The woman's face didn't change, but something in her eyes died a little. She nodded once. I understand. She started to turn away, already gathering her children, already preparing to walk back out into the cold and keep searching for something that probably didn't exist. And Ethan heard himself say, wait. She stopped, looked back at him, waiting. The older boy was watching him too, 10 years old, but with eyes that had seen too much, carried too much, protecting his mother and siblings with nothing but his small body and his willpower. Ethan recognized that look, had seen it in a mirror once, a long time ago. The younger boy swayed again, and this time his eyes rolled back slightly before he caught himself. The woman saw it. Her face went white. My children haven't eaten a real meal in 6 days, she said, and there was no begging in her voice. Just facts. Just truth laid bare. My son almost died of cold on that stagecoach an hour ago. My daughter asked me if we were going to date, and I couldn't tell her no with any certainty. She took a step closer to him, and Ethan could smell the cold on her, the exhaustion, the fear she was holding at bay through sheer force of will. I'm not asking you to save us, she said quietly, intensely. I'm asking you to let us work for the right to save ourselves. The store had gone completely silent. Even Grace Dawson had stopped pretending not to listen. Everyone in Silver Ridge knew Ethan Blackwood, the rancher who'd closed himself off after his wife died, the man who turned everyone away, who'd said no to every woman in 3 counties who'd offered to cook for him, clean for him, anything to get inside those walls he'd built. And here was this stranger asking him for a chance, and something about the way she asked it, the way she stood there with her children and her pride and her desperation reminded him of something he had almost forgotten. What it felt like to need help. What it felt like to have someone see that need and choose to answer it. He looked at the boy with the blue lips, really looked at him. Saw Rebecca's face in the fever that had taken her. Saw her dying while he'd been out hunting, thinking she'd be fine, thinking he had time. Saw all the ways he'd failed and couldn't fix and had to live with. He looked at the older boy, trying so hard to be the man of the family at 10 years old, and saw himself at 12 trying to be tough enough to survive on the streets of Cheyenne. He looked at the little girl, barely more than a baby, clinging to her mother's skirt, and thought about all the children Rebecca had wanted and never had. And he thought about Caleb Winslow, who'd given a chance to a boy who had no reason to expect one. "My ranch is 8 miles north," Ethan said, and the words felt strange in his mouth, like speaking a language he'd almost forgotten. "Work starts before dawn. It's hard. Harder than anything you've probably done before. The children stay out of the way." The woman was staring at him. He could see her trying to understand if this was real, if he was serious, if she dared to hope. "If it doesn't work," he continued, "you leave come spring, no arguments, no negotiations. You just go. Understood?" "Understood," she said immediately. Then quieter, "Thank you." Ethan nodded once. "Be ready at first light tomorrow. I'll bring a wagon." He turned to Grace Dawson. "Add blankets to my order, and whatever food she needs to get through tonight." Then he walked out before anyone could say anything else, before he could think too hard about what he'd just done, before the walls could go back up and change his mind. Outside, the cold air hit his face and cleared his head slightly. He stood there breathing it in, watching his breath cloud in front of him, trying to understand what had just happened. He'd said yes. After 8 years of saying no to everything and everyone, he'd looked at a desperate stranger and her children and said yes. Grace Dawson came out a few minutes later as he was tying his supplies to Ash's saddle. "Ethan Blackwood," she said, and there was wonder in her voice. "In 30 years, I've never seen you agree to anything. What changed?" Ethan pulled the last knot tight and looked at her. Grace was a good woman, fair, had known him since he was young, had known Rebecca, had never pushed or pried, just let him be. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe I'm tired of saying no." Grace studied his face for a long moment. "That woman in there, she's desperate, but she's strong. You could see it in her eyes. Whatever she's running from, she's been running hard." "I know. And you're still going to take her in. I need the help." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was part of it. The ranch was failing. He couldn't run it alone anymore. That was fact, whether he wanted to admit it or not. "There's more to it than that," Grace said quietly. "That boy who's sick. When you looked at him, I saw something in your face I haven't seen in 8 years." Ethan swung up into the saddle, gathering the reins. He didn't want to talk about what he'd seen when he looked at that boy. Didn't want to examine too closely what had made him say yes. "She needs a place. I need help. That's all it is." Grace didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. "Well, maybe it'll be good for you, having people around again. The silence out there would drive most men mad." "I'll see you next week," Ethan said, which was his way of ending the conversation. He touched his hat brim and turned Ash toward home. The ride back was different than the ride in. His mind wouldn't settle, kept circling back to the woman and her children, to the decision he'd made, to what it was going to mean to have people in his house again. Rebecca's house. The house came into view as he crested the last rise. Small, solid, built by Caleb 40 years ago and maintained since. Ethan had grown up in that house, had brought Rebecca there as a bride, had watched her die in the bedroom on the east side. It had been a tomb for 8 years, a place to sleep and eat and nothing more. No laughter, no conversation, no life. And tomorrow he was bringing 3 children into it. A woman who'd ask questions he didn't want to answer, who'd move things and change things and make the space feel different. The part of him that had been frozen solid for 8 years wanted to ride back to town, tell the woman he'd changed his mind, go back to his silent existence. But the part of him that remembered being 12 years old and desperate and saved by a stranger's kindness wouldn't let him. He put ash in the barn and stood for a moment in the dimness, breathing in the smell of hay and horse. Tomorrow his life would change. For better or worse, he didn't know. But it would change. The house felt emptier than usual when he entered, like it knew what was coming and was holding its breath. Ethan built up the fire, made coffee, stood at the window watching the sun sink toward the mountains. He should prepare the room for them. The guest room that hadn't been used since Caleb died. Should make sure it was clean, aired out, ready for occupants. The room was on the west side of the house. Ethan opened the door and stood in the doorway looking at the space as if seeing it for the first time. Bed, dresser, washstand, simple, clean, impersonal. Like everything else in the house had become. He found himself thinking about Rebecca's things. Her clothes still hung in the wardrobe in his bedroom. Her hairbrush still sat on the dresser. 8 years and he hadn't moved any of it. Couldn't bring himself to pack it away. Couldn't face the finality of it. But he couldn't bring a woman and children into this house with Rebecca's ghost in every corner either. That wasn't fair. To anyone. The realization hit him hard enough that he had to sit down on the bed. He was going to have to let go. Not of Rebecca herself, never that, but of the shrine he'd made of this place, of the frozen moment in time he'd been living in since the day she died. The thought terrified him. Because if he let go of the grief, what would he have left? The grief had been his constant companion for 8 years, had defined who he was. Without it, he'd be nothing. No one. Except that wasn't true. Was it Caleb had taught him to be more than that? Rebecca had loved more than that. He was a rancher, a man who worked the land, someone who'd been given chances and had tried to honor them. Until Rebecca died and he'd stopped trying, stopped doing anything but surviving. The anger rose again, but this time it was different. Not the helpless rage at fate, something more useful. Anger at himself for wasting 8 years, for letting the ranch decline, for forgetting what Caleb and Rebecca had both tried to teach him about living instead of just existing. He stood up and started cleaning, swept the floor, dusted the furniture, changed the sheets on the bed, found extra blankets in the chest at the foot of his own bed, opened the window briefly to let fresh air in, cold as it was. By the time he was done, full dark had fallen. He made himself dinner, bacon and beans, same thing he ate most nights. Tomorrow that would change too. There'd be a woman in his kitchen, cooking, changing the rhythms he'd lived by for so long. The thought should have bothered him more than it did. He sat by the fire after dinner, not reading, not doing anything, just sitting and thinking. Tomorrow, at first light, he'd go back to town, load up a woman and 3 children he didn't know and bring them here. Give them a chance the way Caleb had given him one 26 years ago. And maybe, just maybe, giving them a chance would give him one too. A chance to be something other than a ghost haunting his own life. A chance to honor Rebecca's memory by actually living instead of just waiting to die. The fire burned down to embers. Ethan banked it for the night and went to his bedroom. Rebecca's things were everywhere. Her shawl on the chair by the window, her Bible on the bedside table, her handkerchief, the one she'd embroidered in the last month of her life, still tucked in the drawer. He picked it up. Lavender scent still clung to the fabric after 8 years. Rebecca had loved lavender, had grown it in the garden, dried it, tucked sachets of it everywhere. I'm going to try, he said quietly to the empty room, to Rebecca's memory, to the ghost he'd been living with. I don't know if I can do it, don't know if I should, but I'm going to try to be alive again. I hope that's okay. The room didn't answer. Of course it didn't, but somehow Ethan felt lighter, like something had shifted, like permission had been granted, even if only in his own head. He slept better that night than he had in months. No dreams, just darkness and rest. The alarm in his head woke him at 4:30 as always, but this time instead of the usual dread of facing another empty day, there was something else. Not quite anticipation, more like purpose. He had somewhere to be, something to do that mattered. The morning chores went quickly. Feed the animals, check the cattle, get the wagon ready, load it with the supplies he'd bought yesterday. By the time the sun started to lighten the eastern sky, he was ready to go. The ride to town felt shorter than it had yesterday. The sky was clear, the air brutally cold, but still. No wind, the kind of morning that promised the temperature would drop even further once night fell again. Silver Ridge was just waking up when he arrived. Smoke from chimneys, a few people moving on the street, And there, standing outside Grace Dawson's store with 3 children and a pitiful collection of belongings, was the woman. She saw him coming and straightened, gathering her children close, preparing herself for whatever came next. Always preparing, always braced for impact. Ethan pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down. The woman watched him, her face carefully neutral. Ms. He realized he didn't know her name. Morrison, she said. Kate Morrison, this is Benjamin, Thomas, and Emma. Ethan nodded to each child in turn. Benjamin, the 10-year-old, met his eyes steadily, assessing, protecting. Thomas, the 6-year-old, who'd been sick yesterday, looked better this morning, color in his face. Alert. Emma, the little girl, hid behind her mother's skirts, but peeked out at him with those enormous blue eyes. Mr. Blackwood, Kate Morrison said formally, we're ready and grateful for the opportunity. Get in the back with the children, Ethan said, moving to help her with her bags. They weighed almost nothing. Everything this family owned fit in 2 cloth bags. The reality of that sat heavy in his chest. I'll ride up front. Kate Morrison's voice was firm. If that's acceptable. Ethan paused, looked at her. Most people would want to ride in the back where it was more sheltered, where they didn't have to make conversation with a stranger who'd made it clear he didn't want company. But Kate Morrison wasn't most people. He'd already figured that out. Suit yourself, he said, and helped the children into the back of the wagon, instead making sure they were settled among the supplies and blankets. Kate climbed up to the seat beside him without help, moving with a kind of determined independence that said she was used to doing things on her own, used to not being able to rely on anyone. They rode in silence for the first mile. Ethan didn't know what to say, didn't know how to make small talk, had forgotten if he ever knew how in the first place. It was Kate who finally spoke. 8 miles, that's far from town. Far enough. On purpose. Ethan glanced at her. She was looking straight ahead, her profile sharp against the white landscape. Not prying, just stating fact. Yes. She nodded slowly as if that told her something. Maybe it did. Another mile passed. Then, your boy, the one who was sick, Thomas, how long has he been coughing? Kate's hands tightened on her cloak. A week, maybe more. It comes and goes. I have medicine at the ranch. Old stuff, but it works. She turned to look at him then. Really look at him. Why do you care? Fair question. He'd asked himself the same thing last night. Sick people can't work. It was a lie and they both knew it. But she let it stand, nodded once, turned back to face forward. The ranch appeared gradually. First the fence line, then the pastures with cattle dotting them. Then the buildings coming into view over the last rise. Ethan watched Kate Morrison's face as she saw it, saw her taking it in. The barn, the chicken coop, the woodshed, the house, cataloging, calculating, figuring out what her life here would look like. It's bigger than I expected, she said quietly. 300 acres, cattle ranch, some horses, chickens, basic farming. And you run it alone? I've been trying to. The admission cost him something, but it was true. Not doing a great job of it. Kate looked at him again and something in her expression softened slightly. Then it's good we came. He pulled the wagon up in front of the house and climbed down, helped the children out. They stood huddled together, looking around with wide eyes. Everything must seem enormous to them. Foreign, frightening. Come inside, Ethan said and led the way. The house felt different with people in it, fuller, warmer, even though the temperature hadn't changed. Ethan watched Kate Morrison's face as she looked around the main room. The big fireplace, the simple furniture, the complete lack of anything personal or decorative. Your room is through there, he said, pointing to the west door. Mine is there. Don't go in it. Kitchen has what you need. Breakfast is at 5. Work starts before dawn. Kate nodded, taking it all in. What about the children? Ethan looked at them, Benjamin watching everything, Thomas already eyeing the bookshelf beside the fireplace, Emma still clinging to her mother's skirt. Benjamin? The boy's attention snapped to him immediately. How old are you? 10, sir. You want to learn to work a ranch? Something lit in Benjamin's eyes. Yes, sir. Come with me after breakfast. I'll show you the barn. The boy nodded, standing a little straighter. Thomas? The younger boy looked up at him nervously. You like animals? Yes, sir. Someone needs to collect eggs from the chickens every morning. Can you do that? Thomas's whole face brightened. I can. Good, Emma. The little girl pressed closer to her mother but didn't look away from him. You help your mother. Stay out of trouble. Can you do that? The smallest nod. Ethan turned back to Kate. That's it. You have questions, ask them. You have problems, solve them. Supper at 6. Understood. Understood. Kate's voice was steady, but he could see the relief in her eyes. They had a place, a chance. That was more than they had had yesterday. I'll be in the barn, Ethan said, and walked out before the situation could get any more complicated. The barn was his refuge, always had been. He went to Ash's stall and stood there breathing in the familiar smells, trying to process what he'd just done. He'd brought people into his house, Rebecca's house, after swearing he never would, after 8 years of keeping everyone at arm's length. And it had been surprisingly easy, almost natural, like some part of him had been waiting for this without knowing it. Ethan spent the rest of the morning working. There was always work. Fences to check, hay to move, tools to maintain. The kind of work that lets your mind go quiet and your body take over. At noon, he went back to the house, could smell something cooking before he even opened the door. His steps slowed. When was the last time he'd come home to the smell of food being prepared by someone else? 8 years. Rebecca making his favorite stew, smiling when he came in, always smiling. He opened the door. Kate Morrison stood at the stove, her back to him, working efficiently. The children were at the table, Benjamin reading aloud from one of the books, Thomas playing with something made from corn husks, Emma watching her mother with solemn eyes. It looked like a family. It looked like life. Kate turned as he entered. I hope you don't mind. I found what I needed and made lunch. The biscuits aren't great. The stove is temperamental. Ethan looked at the table. Buttercups that were slightly burned on the bottom. Soup made from the supplies he'd bought. Simple, basic, but made with care. The damper needs adjusting every hour, he said. Heat runs uneven otherwise. Kate nodded, filing that information away. I'll figure it out. He sat down at the table. The children went quiet, watching him, waiting to see what he'd do. He wasn't used to being watched, wasn't used to having to think about how his actions affected other people. Benjamin passed him the buttercups without being asked. The boy had manners, good instincts, protective of his family but not hostile. That mattered. They ate in near silence. Ethan finished quickly as he always did. Work didn't stop for long meals. But before he could get up, Kate spoke. Mr. Blackwood, the medicine you mentioned, for Thomas. I'll get it. He stood and went to the high shelf in the kitchen where he kept medical supplies. Found the bottle he was looking for. This, 2 spoonfuls morning and night. It tastes terrible, but it works. Kate took it carefully. Thank you. He nodded and looked at Benjamin. You coming? The boy was up immediately. Yes, sir. They walked to the barn together. The boy moved well for 10, long legs eating up the distance. Tough, not complaining about the cold, even though his coat was too thin for Wyoming winter. Your father, Ethan said as they walked. How'd he die? Benjamin's face tightened, but he answered. Mine accident. Silver mine in Missouri. Cave in. Killed 17 men. I'm sorry. Thank you, sir. They reached the barn. Ethan showed Benjamin around, where everything was kept. How to feed the horses, how to check their hooves, how to clean the stalls properly. The boy listened intently, asked good questions, worked without complaint when given a task. Caleb would have liked this boy, would have seen the same potential Ethan was seeing, the same determination to be useful, to not be a burden. After an hour of work, Benjamin spoke up. Mr. Blackwood, yeah. Why did you say yes? Mama says every rancher for 50 miles turned us away. What made you different? Ethan considered the question. The boy deserved honesty. 26 years ago, I was 12 years old, orphaned, starving, standing outside a general store in Cheyenne trying to figure out how to survive. A rancher named Caleb Winslow stopped, asked if I wanted to work, took me in, raised me, left me this ranch when he died. Benjamin was quiet, processing. I said yes to your mother because someone once said yes to me, that's all. That's enough, Benjamin said quietly. Then, sir, I won't let you down. I know. They worked in comfortable silence after that. By the time they headed back to the house for supper, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years, almost like satisfaction, like he'd done something right. Supper was better than lunch. Kate had figured out the stove. The food was simple but good, solid, filling. The children ate like they were still afraid the food might disappear. After supper, Thomas worked up the courage to ask about the chickens. Ethan told him about collecting eggs, about being gentle with the hens, about staying calm so they didn't get spooked. The boy drank it all in like water in a desert. Emma fell asleep at the table before dessert. Kate picked her up gently, murmuring something about getting her to bed. Ethan watched them go and felt something twist in his chest. Rebecca would have loved having children in the house, would have fussed over them, made sure they had everything they needed, would have made this place a home instead of just a house. But Rebecca was gone, and Kate Morrison and her children were here. And Ethan was going to have to figure out how to live with that. By 8 o'clock, the children were all in bed. Kate emerged from their room and found Ethan sitting by the fire with a book he wasn't reading. "They're exhausted," she said. "They'll sleep well tonight." "Good." She stood there for a moment, clearly wanting to say something, but not sure how to start. "Thank you," she finally said, "for giving us this chance. I know it's not easy. Having strangers in your home, it's not. No point in lying. If there's anything you need us to do differently, please tell me. We'll adapt." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. In the firelight, she looked older than she had this morning, worn down, but still standing, still fighting. "Why were you in Silver Ridge?" he asked. "What were you running from?" Kate's face closed off slightly. "Does it matter?" "Might." She was quiet for a long moment. "Then debts. My husband left debts when he died. People who wanted them paid. I couldn't, so I ran. They follow you." "I don't know. I hope not." Ethan nodded slowly. "If they show up here, we'll deal with it." Kate stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because you're under my roof now. That means something." Something in her face cracked slightly, not breaking, just softening. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just keep your word. Work hard. Stay through spring. That's enough." She nodded. "Good night, Mr. Blackwood." "Ethan. Just call me Ethan." "Good night, Ethan." She disappeared into her room and closed the door. Ethan sat alone by the fire, listening to the old house settle, and thought about how much had changed in 24 hours. Yesterday he'd been alone, failing, giving up slowly. Today he had 4 people depending on him, a reason to get up in the morning that was more than just habit. It should have terrified him. Maybe it did a little, but mostly it just felt like waking up after a long sleep. Painful, disorienting, but necessary. The fire burned down. Ethan banked it and went to bed. Tomorrow would come early, but that was okay. Tomorrow had purpose now. The first 5 days established a routine. Ethan and Benjamin worked together in the mornings. The boy learned fast, worked hard, never complained. By the 3rd day, he was handling tasks on his own. By the 5th day, he was anticipating what needed doing before being told. Thomas took over the chickens completely, named them all, reported to Kate every evening about which hens were laying well and which weren't. The boy had a gift with animals, a gentleness that was rare. Emma stayed close to Kate, helping where she could, slowly coming out of her shell. By the 4th day, she smiled at Ethan when he came in for lunch. By the 5th day, she asked him a question about the horses. Progress, small but real. Kate proved herself too. She figured out the stove completely by the 2nd day. The house started to look cleaner, more organized. Meals improved. She didn't ask permission for anything, just saw what needed doing and did it. The house felt different, fuller, warmer, like it was remembering what it had been like when Rebecca was alive, and it had been a home instead of a tomb. On the 5th night, as Ethan was heading to bed, Kate stopped him. "Can I ask you something?" He turned. She was standing by the firelight, making her face softer, younger. "Ask." "Who was she, the woman who lived here before?" Ethan's chest tightened. "My wife, Rebecca. She died 8 years ago." Kate nodded slowly. "I thought so. The house feels like someone loved it once. She did. I'm sorry for your loss." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. After 8 years, condolences felt meaningless. But Kate Morrison didn't look like she was offering meaningless words. She looked like she understood. Your husband, he said. You loved him? Yes, he wasn't perfect, made mistakes, but he loved his children. That counted for something. They stood there in silence for a moment. Two people who'd both lost someone, who'd both been broken and were trying to figure out how to put themselves back together. Good night, Kate said finally. Good night. The sixth day dawned clear and bitterly cold, the kind of cold that made metal stick to skin and breath freeze in your lungs. Ethan woke with a bad feeling he couldn't name, just a sense that something was coming, something he needed to be ready for. He did his morning routine faster than usual, got Benjamin started on chores, checked on the cattle more thoroughly than normal. Everything looked fine, but the feeling wouldn't go away. It was mid-afternoon when he heard it. Wind, but not normal wind, the kind of wind that came before a blizzard, the kind that could kill livestock and people if you weren't prepared. He ran for the house. Kate looked up as he burst through the door, her face going pale at his expression. Storm coming. Bad one. I need to check the north fence. If it's down, the cattle will scatter and freeze. I'm coming with you. No. You can't do it alone. If you die out there, what happens to us? She was right. He hated that she was right. But she was. Get the warmest clothes you have. Be ready in 5 minutes. They rode out into gathering darkness. The wind had picked up to a howl, snow starting to fall in thick sheets that made it nearly impossible to see. Ethan led trusting Ash to find the way. Kate followed on the other horse hunched against the cold. Finding the fence took 20 minutes that felt like hours. The wind was savage. The cold cut through every layer of clothing. And Kate kept up, never complained, never asked to turn back. The fence was down, just as he'd feared. Cattle were already starting to drift through the gap, following instinct that would lead them to freeze in open pasture. They worked together. Ethan hammered boards back into place. Kate held them steady. They drove cattle back through the gap. Kate's hands were shaking with cold. So were his, but they didn't stop. By the time the fence was secured and the cattle were turned back and they were both barely able to stay upright, the cold had gotten into their bones. Their movements were slow, clumsy, dangerous. The ride back was a nightmare. Ethan could barely stay conscious. Kate slumped forward over her horse's neck. Only Ash's sure instinct got them back to the barn. In the barn, Ethan tried to dismount and his legs gave out completely. He hit the ground hard. Kate tried to help him and went down too. Benjamin was there. The boy must have been watching. He helped his mother up, helped Ethan, got them both moving toward the house, kept saying, "It's okay, you're home, you're safe." 10 years old and already a man when it counted. Inside, the fire was blazing. Thomas and Emma stared at them with wide, frightened eyes. Kate's hands were so cold she couldn't feel them. Ethan's face had gone numb. Benjamin got his mother into a chair by the fire, wrapped her in blankets, made her drink hot coffee that she couldn't taste. "The cattle?" Kate asked through chattering teeth. "Safe." Ethan's voice didn't sound like his own. "We got them. Saved the ranch." Kate looked at him across the space between their chairs, and Ethan saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Recognition, understanding, partnership. "You didn't quit," he said quietly. "Out there. You didn't quit. Neither did you." They sat there warming themselves while the blizzard howled outside, and Ethan realized something had changed, something fundamental. Kate Morrison wasn't just hired help anymore. She was someone who'd stood with him in the worst the land could throw at them. Someone who'd proven herself in the only way that mattered out here, by not breaking. The fire warmed them slowly. Feeling came back to hands and feet in painful prickles. The children settled down. Benjamin sat at his mother's feet holding her hand, his face still pale with worry. "You scared me," Benjamin said quietly. "Both of you, when you didn't come back." "I know, sweetheart." Kate's voice was soft. "I'm sorry, but we had to save the cattle. That's what ranchers do." "Is that what we are now, ranchers?" Kate looked at Ethan. He looked back, and something passed between them in that moment. Something that had nothing to do with employment and everything to do with belonging. "Yes," Kate said finally. "I think maybe we are." Outside, the blizzard raged on through the night. But inside, in that small house on the Wyoming plains, 4 people and a man who'd been alone too long were becoming something new. Not a family yet, but maybe the beginning of one. And for the first time in 8 years, Ethan Blackwood went to sleep feeling like he might have a future worth living for. The morning after the blizzard dawned cold and brilliant. Sunlight reflecting off fresh snow turned the world into something almost painful to look at. Ethan woke earlier than usual, pulled from sleep by the unfamiliar sound of voices in his house. Kate's low murmur, Benjamin responding, the clink of dishes. He lay there for a moment listening. 8 years of silence broken by the simple sounds of people living. It should have bothered him, should have felt like an intrusion. Instead, it felt almost like relief, like something tight in his chest was loosening just slightly. He got up and dressed, found Kate already had coffee made when he entered the kitchen. She looked up as he came in and their eyes met. Both of them remembering last night, the storm, the fear, the way they'd worked together without needing words. "Morning," she said simply. "Morning." He took the coffee she offered. "How are the children?" "Thomas's cough is better. The medicine worked. Emma slept through the night. Benjamin." She paused, looking toward the barn where the boy had gone despite the early hour. "He's worried about you, about me, trying to be the man of the family. He did good last night, real good. Kept his head when it mattered." Something in Kate's face softened. Pride, worry, love, all mixed together in the way only a mother's face could show. They drank their coffee in companionable silence. Not awkward, just two people who'd been through something together and didn't need to fill the space with unnecessary words. "The fence held," Kate asked finally. "Should have. We'll check it today. You and Benjamin did solid work." "We?" Kate said it like she was testing the word. "That's new." Ethan considered that. She was right. He'd been alone so long, thinking in terms of I and me and mine. Now there was we. Now there were people depending on him for more than just a paycheck and a roof. People who'd proven they'd stand with him when things got hard. "Yeah," he said, "it is." Benjamin came back from the barn, stamping snow off his boots. His face was red with cold, but his eyes were bright. Alert. The boy never seemed to stop moving, stop working, stop trying to prove himself useful. "Ash and the other horses are good," Benjamin reported. "I fed them and checked their water. The chickens are fine too. Thomas already collected eggs." "Good work." The boy straightened slightly at the praise. Still unused to it. Still waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this to turn out too good to be true. Ethan knew that feeling, had carried it himself for years after Caleb took him in. Always waiting to wake up and find it had been a dream. Always afraid of making the one mistake that would send him back to the streets. Over breakfast, which Kate had somehow made filling and warm despite their limited supplies, Ethan found himself watching his kitchen table. Benjamin helping Thomas with something. Emma eating slowly, carefully, like food was still precious and might be taken away. Kate moving efficiently between stove and table, making sure everyone had enough. It looked like a family. It felt like one. And that realization hit Ethan harder than he expected. After breakfast, Benjamin followed him out to check the north fence. They rode in comfortable silence, the kind that came from working together. The fence had held. The cattle were where they should be. Everything had survived the storm. "Mr. Blackwood," Benjamin said as they were riding back, "can I ask you something?" "Ask." "Last night, when you and Mama were out there, I was scared, real scared, and I started thinking about what I'd do if something happened to you both. How I'd take care of Thomas and Emma." Ethan waited. Let the boy work through whatever he was trying to say. "My father, he told me before he died that I had to be the man now. Had to take care of Mama and my brother and sister. But I'm only 10. And sometimes I don't know how to be a man when I'm still just a kid." The honesty of it made Ethan's chest tight. He remembered being 12 and feeling the exact same way. Too young for the responsibility, but having no choice but to carry it anyway. "Your father put too much on you," Ethan said finally. "Being a man isn't about age. It's about doing what needs doing even when you're scared. About standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. About being honest and working hard and not giving up when things get tough." He paused, looking at the boy, really seeing him. The two serious eyes, the shoulders that carried too much weight, the determination that kept him going anyway. "You did all that last night. You kept your head, took care of your mother and siblings, made sure the fire stayed going. You did exactly what needed doing. But I was terrified. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway. You understand? Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yes, sir, I think I do. You're a good kid, Ben. Your father would be proud. But you don't have to be the man of the family right now. That's my job. You just be a boy for a while longer. There's time enough for the rest. Something in Benjamin's face cracked. Not breaking, just releasing. Like he'd been given permission to not carry everything alone. Thank you, he said quietly. They rode back to the ranch without speaking again. But the silence was different now. Lighter somehow. The days that followed fell into new rhythms. Ethan and Benjamin worked together every morning. The boy learned quickly, remembered everything, asked smart questions. By the end of the second week, he could handle most of the basic ranch work without supervision. Thomas had made the chickens entirely his domain. He'd named every single hen, knew which ones were broody, which ones were good layers, which ones needed watching. The boy had a gift with animals that reminded Ethan of Caleb. That same patience, same instinct for what they needed. Emma was coming out of her shell slowly, started talking more, laughing sometimes. She'd taken to following Ethan around when he was working near the house, asking questions in her small voice about everything. Why did horses need shoes? Where did chickens come from? Why was the sky blue? He answered as best he could, found himself looking forward to her questions, to the way her face lit up when he explained something. Kate had transformed the house, not by changing anything big, just by being present in it, cooking meals, cleaning corners that hadn't been touched in years, making the space feel lived in instead of haunted. But more than that, she'd started to relax slightly. The desperate edge was fading. She smiled more, laughed at something Benjamin said, sang quietly while she worked. Ethan caught himself watching her sometimes. The way she moved, the way she talked to her children with such obvious love, the way she'd proven herself strong in ways that mattered out here. It made him uncomfortable. This watching, this noticing. Like he was being disloyal to Rebecca's memory. Like feeling anything for another woman was a betrayal. But he couldn't seem to stop. 3 weeks after the blizzard, Ethan was in the barn repairing tack when Kate found him. Can we talk? He looked up. Her face was serious, worried about something. Talk. She came in and closed the barn door behind her. Stood there for a moment like she was gathering courage. The children and I, we've been here almost a month now. And you've been good to us. Better than we had any right to expect. But there's something I need to tell you. Something you should know before. She stopped. Started again. Before you get more invested in us being here. Ethan set down the bridle he was working on. I'm listening. Kate took a breath. Emma isn't my biological daughter. My husband Samuel, he had her from another woman before we married. The woman died in childbirth. Samuel took Emma when she was 18 months old. I've raised her since then, but legally, technically, she's not mine. Ethan waited. There was more. He could tell. I ran from Missouri because Samuel died owing money, a lot of money, to people who weren't patient about collecting, but also because Emma's biological mother had family back east, family with money and lawyers. They started making noise about taking the Emma, saying I had no legal right to her, that she should be with blood family. You ran to keep her. I ran to keep all of them, to keep my family together. But if those people find us, if they decide to push it, I could lose her. The courts might side with them. Blood over 4 years of raising her. Blood over love. Kate's voice had gone tight with fear, with the kind of terror that only a mother protecting her child could feel. Ethan stood slowly, walked over to where she stood, looked down at her. Emma is your daughter in every way that matters. Anyone can see that. She calls you mama, trusts you, needs you. That's what makes family, not blood. Choice, ento. But legally, if someone comes, we'll deal with it. You're under my roof. That means something. I won't let anyone take that little girl from you without a fight. Kate stared at him. Why? Why would you do that for us? You barely know us. I know enough. I know you walked into a blizzard to save my cattle. I know you work harder than any hand I've ever had. I know your children are good kids who deserve a chance. He paused. And I know what it's like to be alone and scared and need someone to stand with you. Something in Kate's face cracked. Her eyes got bright. She looked away quickly, blinking hard. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet. We don't know if anyone's even looking." But the worry was there now. In both of them, a new shadow over the peace they'd been building. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about what Kate had told him. About Emma being taken. About courts and lawyers and blood rights versus the right of love. It made him angry. Made him want to fight something. Protect something. He hadn't felt protective of anything except this ranch in 8 years. Now suddenly he was ready to go to war for a 4-year-old girl he'd known less than a month. The realization should have scared him, should have sent him running. Instead, it just felt right. Like something frozen inside him was finally thawing. Finally remembering how to care about something beyond just surviving day to day. December arrived with more snow and bitter cold. But inside the house, something was warming. Small moments that built on each other. Benjamin's laugh when Ethan showed him how to rope. Thomas's pride when he reported a record number of eggs collected. Emma's shy smile when she brought Ethan a cup of coffee she'd made herself with her mother's help. And Kate who'd somehow become not just hired help, but something more. Partners seemed too formal. Friends seemed too distant. Whatever it was growing, changing, becoming something Ethan didn't quite know how to name. 2 weeks before Christmas, Benjamin mentioned it at breakfast. "Mama, it's almost Christmas. Papa used to make us things, remember?" The table went quiet. Thomas's face fell. Emma looked at her mother with hopeful eyes. Kate's expression went carefully neutral, the way it did when she was hiding pain. "I remember, sweetheart, but we don't have much for gifts this year. Maybe we'll figure something out," Ethan heard himself say. All eyes turned to him. Christmas should be Christmas. Kids should get something. Kate opened her mouth, closed it, finally just nodded, her eyes bright. That night, after everyone was asleep, Ethan went to the barn. He hadn't touched his carving tools in 8 years. Rebecca had taught him, said it was a way to make beauty in a harsh world, said his hands were good for more than just hard work. After she died, he'd packed the tools away. Couldn't bear to touch them. Couldn't bear to do something that reminded him so completely of her. But now he pulled out the box, opened it, ran his fingers over the tools that felt both familiar and foreign. He could make something for Emma. A horse, maybe. She'd been fascinated by the horses since arriving. Could make a doll, too, if he remembered how. And a knife for Benjamin, a real one, the kind a working man carried. And something for Thomas. A chicken maybe carved to look like that speckled hen he loved so much. He pulled out a block of wood and started working. His hands remembered even if his heart had tried to forget. He was so focused he didn't hear Kate come in, didn't know she was there until she spoke softly from the doorway. "I didn't know you could carve." Ethan's hands stilled, didn't turn around. "Rebecca taught me. Haven't done it since she died." Kate came closer, looked at the half-formed horse taking shape under his knife. "It's beautiful. It's rough." "No, it's beautiful." They stood there in the lamplight, close but not touching, both of them aware of the space between them and what it might mean if that space closed. "Why did you stop?" Kate asked quietly. She died. "Why did you stop making things?" Ethan set down the carving, finally turned to look at her. "Because every time I picked up these tools, I saw her, teaching me, guiding my hands, laughing when I made a mistake. It hurt too much. And now it still hurts, but maybe that's okay. Maybe the hurt means she mattered, means what she taught me mattered." Kate nodded slowly. "Samuel used to sing, had a beautiful voice. After he died, I couldn't listen to music for a year. Every song just made me cry. But eventually I started singing again. For the children. Because he would have wanted them to have music in their lives." "You sing, Mom," a small smile. "Not well, but yes." "I've never heard you." "I sing quietly when I'm working, when I think no one's listening." They looked at each other. Two people who'd both lost someone, who'd both been broken and were trying to figure out how to live again. "I should get back," Kate said. "Let you work." But she didn't move, and neither did Ethan. "Kate," her name felt strange in his mouth, intimate. "I'm glad you came here. Glad you didn't leave after that first hard week." So am I. She said it so softly he almost didn't hear it. Then she turned and walked back to the house, and Ethan stood alone in the barn with a half-carved horse and a heart that was feeling things he'd sworn he'd never feel again. He worked on the gifts every night for the next 2 weeks, hiding them when anyone came near, making sure they'd be ready for Christmas morning. The days were good. The ranch was running better than it had in years. Having help, real help, made all the difference. Benjamin was turning into a solid hand. Kate had taken over all the household management. Even Thomas and Emma contributed in their small ways. But more than that, the house felt alive again, felt like a home. And Ethan was starting to realize how much he'd missed that, how much he'd needed it without knowing. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. Ethan woke to the sound of excited children's voices, Emma's squeal, Thomas's laugh, Benjamin trying to shush them both but obviously excited himself. He got up and dressed quickly. Went out to find the children gathered around the fireplace where he'd laid out the gifts before going to bed. Emma found the horse first, picked it up with reverent hands. Mama, look. Look how beautiful. The doll came next. Kate had somehow made a dress for it from fabric scraps. Emma immediately named it Rebecca, and Ethan had to turn away for a moment, his throat too tight to speak. Benjamin opened his knife carefully, drew the blade, tested the edge with respect. This is a man's knife, he said quietly. You've earned it, but it's a tool, not a toy. You treat it right, it'll last you the rest of your life. Yes, sir. The boy's voice was thick. Thank you. Thomas found the carved chicken and burst out laughing. It looks just like Buttercup. Look, Mama. It has the same grumpy face. Everyone laughed at that, even Ethan. And the sound felt so strange and so good he almost didn't recognize it as his own voice. Kate had made gifts too. New shirts for the boys from fabric she'd somehow acquired. A vest for Ethan pieced together from whatever materials she could find, lined with wool for warmth. He put it on immediately. It fit perfectly. Felt like it had been made just for him, which it had. Thank you, he said, and meant it for more than just the vest. Kate smiled. You're welcome. Merry Christmas, Ethan. Merry Christmas. They spent the day together, all of them, eating a meal Kate had been preparing for days, playing games the children taught him, reading stories by the fire, being a family in all the ways that mattered. And that night, after the children were in bed, Kate found Ethan standing on the porch looking at the stars. Cold out here, she said, wrapping a shawl tighter around her shoulders. Yeah, she stood beside him, not too close, but close enough that he could feel her presence like warmth. Today was good, she said quietly. The children were so happy. Thank you for the gifts, for making Christmas special. Thank you for the vest. And for, he struggled to find words, for making this place feel like a home again. Kate was quiet for a long moment, then so softly he almost didn't hear it. Is that what we are now? A home? Ethan thought about that, about what home meant. It wasn't just a building, it was people, connection, belonging. It was coming back at the end of a hard day to voices and laughter and someone who cared if you made it back safe. Yeah, he said, I think maybe it is. They stood together in the cold looking at the stars, and Ethan felt something he hadn't felt since Rebecca died. Hope. The fragile, terrifying, necessary kind of hope that maybe life had more to offer than just survival. Maybe it could offer living again. The day after Christmas, Ethan took Kate up the hill behind the house, the place he hadn't brought anyone in 8 years, the place where Rebecca rested. Kate walked beside him in silence, letting him set the pace, not asking questions, just being present. At the top of the hill, the grave marker stood simple and stark against the snow. Rebecca Jane Blackwood, beloved wife, the dates that marked a life too short. I haven't brought anyone here since the funeral, Ethan said. Didn't want to share this. It was the last place that was just mine and hers. Kate stood quietly, respectful, waiting. She died of fever. I was out hunting. Thought she'd be fine. Thought I had time. When I got back, she was already gone. I'm sorry. I buried her myself. Ground was frozen, but I dug anyway. 12 hours, hands bleeding. But I didn't stop because if I stopped, I'd have to accept that she was really gone. Ethan's voice had gone rough. 8 years and it still hurt to talk about. Still hurt to remember. I've blamed myself ever since. If I'd been here, if I'd stayed home that day, maybe I could have saved her. Kate was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. My husband died in a mine collapse. 17 men died that day. I spent a year wondering if I could have stopped him from going to work that morning. If I'd asked him to stay home, maybe he'd still be alive. She paused, looking at the grave marker. But eventually I realized that kind of thinking leads nowhere. Samuel chose to go to work because he loved us and wanted to provide. Your wife wouldn't want you to carry guilt for being who you are. A rancher. Someone who does what needs doing. Ethan looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who'd come into his life by accident and was somehow changing everything. I don't know how to let go, he said quietly. Don't know how to stop feeling guilty. You don't let go, you just add to it. Love Rebecca, always, but also love living. Love the people in your life now. Both things can be true at the same time. And if I love someone else, the words came out before he could stop them. If I feel things I swore I'd never feel again. Kate's breath caught. Then Rebecca would want that. Because she loved you. And love doesn't mean you stop when someone dies. It means you keep going, you honor them by living fully. Ethan turned to face her completely. Looked down at her face framed by winter air and snowlight. I think I'm falling in love with you, Kate Morrison. And that terrifies me more than anything else in my life. Kate's eyes got bright. Why? Because I couldn't survive losing someone again, and loving you means risking that loss. Then don't lose me. Kate's voice was fierce now, strong. Fight for me, for us, for what we're building together. I will. The words came out like a vow, like a promise. I'll fight for you, for the children, for this family we're making. Kate reached up and touched his face, cold fingers against cold skin, but somehow it felt like warmth. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. Didn't mean to, didn't want to, but I am. They stood there on that hill with Rebecca's grave between them and the future spreading out uncertain and possible, and Ethan felt something break open in his chest. Not breaking in the bad way, breaking like ice, breaking in spring, making way for new growth, new life. He wanted to kiss her, wanted it so badly his whole body ached with it. But not here, not at Rebecca's grave. That felt wrong somehow, disrespectful. So instead he took her hand, held it. Let that be enough for now. Come on, he said quietly. Let's go home. They walked down the hill together hand in hand, and Ethan knew something fundamental had changed. Something that couldn't be unchanged. For better or worse, he'd opened his heart again. Let someone in, let himself care. It should have terrified him, it did terrify him. But it also felt like the first real thing he'd done in 8 years. New Year's Eve arrived with bitter cold and clear skies. The children were asleep. The house was quiet. Kate and Ethan sat by the fire not talking, just being together in comfortable silence. What are you thinking about? Kate asked finally. The future. What happens next? Spring will come. That was our agreement. You could leave then if you wanted. Kate looked at him. Do you want me to leave? No. The answer came immediately. Honestly. No, I don't. Then I won't. Just like that. Just like that. Kate smiled slightly. This is home now, for me and the children. Unless you're saying you don't want us here. I want you here. Ethan set down his coffee. Kate, I want you to stay. Not as hired help. Not as a temporary arrangement. I want this to be real. It already is real. You know what I mean. Kate was quiet for a moment. Then she moved from her chair to sit beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Say it properly, she said quietly. Say what you mean. Ethan turned to face her. This woman who'd come into his life broken and desperate, and had somehow made him remember how to be alive. This woman who'd stood in a blizzard with him, who'd made his house a home, who'd given him a reason to wake up every morning. Kate Morrison, I haven't let myself want anything in 8 years. Didn't think I deserved to want things, to hope for things, but you've changed that. You and your children. You've made me remember what it feels like to actually live instead of just survive. He took her hand, held it carefully, like something precious. I'm broken. I've got damage I don't know how to fix. I'll probably make you angry once a week for the rest of your life. But if you're willing to stay, if you can look at all my broken pieces and still want to be here, then I want you to stay. Not just through spring, forever." Kate's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "That sounds like a proposal. It's a promise. When I propose, and I will, I want you to be sure. Sure of me. Sure of this life. Sure that you're choosing what you actually want, not just choosing safety. So for now, this is just me asking you to stay, to build this life with me, one day at a time. And in the meantime, we keep doing what we're doing, taking care of the ranch, raising the children, learning each other, until the day comes when making it official feels right." Kate leaned her head against his shoulder. Ethan put his arm around her. They sat like that as the fire burned low and the old year died and the new year was born. "I can do that," Kate whispered. "I can stay, build this with you, one day at a time." "Good." They sat together in the quiet house holding each other, and Ethan felt something he hadn't felt since Rebecca died. Complete. Like all the pieces of himself that had been scattered and broken were finally starting to come back together. It wasn't the same as what he'd had with Rebecca. It was different, its own thing. And that was okay. That was how it should be. The fire burned down to embers. Outside, the Wyoming night was cold and vast and full of stars. Inside, two broken people had found each other and were slowly, carefully building something new from the pieces of their shattered lives. February arrived hard and cold, but inside the ranch house, warmth was growing. Ethan and Kate's relationship deepened, not rushing, just letting it unfold naturally. Small touches, conversations that lasted long into the night, looks that said more than words could. The children were thriving. Benjamin had grown 2 inches and was handling work that would challenge many grown men. Thomas's cough was completely gone, his cheeks filling out with regular meals. Emma was talking constantly now, asking questions, laughing, being the child she'd been too scared to be before. Everything was good, better than good. For the first time in 8 years, Ethan was actually happy. That's when the letter arrived. It came on a Tuesday afternoon. Grace Dawson's boy brought it out from town, said a lawyer from back east had been asking questions about a widow named Morrison with 3 children. Ethan opened it with hands that wanted to shake. Kate stood beside him, her face going pale as he read. The letter was from a law firm in Boston, Hartfield and Associates, representing Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Hartfield regarding a matter of family custody. They understood a Mrs. Catherine Morrison and 3 minor children were residing on his property. They requested a meeting to discuss the legal status of one Emma Morrison, age 4, whose biological ties to the Hartfield family had been documented. Failure to respond may result in legal action. Ethan read it twice, then looked at Kate. Her face had gone white. Her hands were shaking. "They found us," she whispered. "Oh God, they found us." Ethan set down the letter, took Katie's hands in his, held them until she looked at him. "Listen to me. They're not taking Emma. They're not taking any of you. You understand? But they have lawyers, money, legal documentation. And you have me. And you have 4 years of being her mother, and you have a family that loves her." His voice was hard, certain. "We'll fight this, together. How we can't afford lawyers, can't fight people with that kind of money and power." Ethan pulled her close, let her lean against him while fear tried to take hold. "I'll find a way. I'll go to Cheyenne, find a lawyer, figure out what our options are. But Kate, I promise you I will not let them take that little girl, not without one hell of a fight." Kate nodded against his chest, but he could feel her shaking, could feel how scared she was. And it made him angry, made him want to protect her and the children with a fierceness that surprised him. That night, after the children were asleep, Kate told him everything. About Emma's biological mother dying, about the Hartfield family never once reaching out, never once offering help. Only now, years later, suddenly deciding they had rights. "Eleanor Hartfield is Emma's biological mother's sister," Kate said. "She and her husband have money, position. They're making it sound like they're rescuing Emma from poverty and hardship, like I'm not fit to raise her. That's garbage, and any court with sense will see it. But what if they don't? What if blood matters more than love? What if I lose her?" Ethan pulled Kate close. "You won't. We won't let that happen. But even as he said it, fear crept in, because people with money and lawyers usually won, and he and Kate were just regular folks trying to make a living on a failing ranch. Still, he'd promised to fight. And Ethan Blackwood kept his promises. The next morning, he left for Cheyenne. 5 days of hard riding. Kate wanted to come, but someone needed to stay with the children. Someone needed to keep the ranch running. So Ethan went alone, carrying the letter and the weight of his family's future. Cheyenne had grown since he'd last been there as a boy. Bigger, more established, and the kind of place where lawyers had actual offices instead of practicing out of saloons. James Harker's office was on the main street, second floor above a dry goods store. Ethan climbed the stairs, feeling every one of his 38 years. Harker was younger than Ethan expected, maybe 30, sharp eyes, confident bearing, the kind of man who'd been educated back east but had come west to make his name. "Mr. Blackwood, I got your message. Please sit." Ethan sat, laid out the situation. Kate and the children. The Hartfield letter, Emma's status as Kate's adopted daughter, the threat of custody battle. Harker listened carefully, made notes, asked questions, and the more he asked, the grimmer his expression became. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Blackwood. This isn't going to be easy. The Hartfields have documentation showing blood relation. Mrs. Morrison has no legal adoption papers. In the eyes of the law, she has no parental rights. She's raised that child for 4 years. Doesn't that count for something?" "It does, but it might not count for enough." Harker leaned back in his chair. "Here's the problem. Mrs. Morrison is a widow, was living in poverty, fled her home state. Now she's living on your ranch, a ranch owned by a bachelor. We're married." The words came out before Ethan had fully thought them through. "As of 2 weeks ago, everything's legal and proper now." Harker looked at him, long and hard, reading between the lines. "That helps, significantly. It gives Mrs. Blackwood legal standing as a married woman with an established household. It makes it much harder for the Hartfields to claim she's unfit. So we have a chance? You have a chance. But you need to understand, Mr. Blackwood, people like the Hartfields don't lose gracefully. If they're determined to pursue this, they'll make it expensive and ugly. Are you prepared for that?" Ethan thought about Emma, about her small hand in his when they walked to the barn, about the way she called him Papa now without any hesitation, about Kate's face if that child was taken from her. "I'm prepared to do whatever it takes," Harker nodded slowly. "Then let's get to work." They spent 3 days going over strategy, what documentation they'd need, what witnesses would help, how to frame the case in the best possible light. By the time Ethan left Cheyenne, he had a plan. Maybe not a great plan, but something. The ride home felt longer than the ride out. He kept thinking about what he'd told Harker, that he and Kate were married. It was a lie. But it was also the truth of what needed to happen. If they were married, Emma would have 2 legal parents, a stable home, protection under the law that she didn't have with Kate alone. But marriage meant commitment. Forever. It meant standing in front of law and witnesses and promising things you couldn't take back. Was he ready for that? After 8 years of closing himself off, could he really open up that completely? The answer came as he crested the last rise and saw the ranch spread out below. Smoke from the chimney, lights in the windows. Home. Yes, he was ready. Because somewhere over the past 2 months, Kate and her children had become his family. The ranch had become a home again instead of just a place to survive, and he'd do anything to protect that. When he rode into the yard, Kate came running out. She'd been watching for him. The relief on her face when she saw him was worth every hard mile. "What did the lawyer say?" Ethan dismounted, took her hands. "He said we have a chance, but only if we're married, legally, as soon as possible." Kate went still. "Married. I know this isn't romantic. I know this isn't how anyone dreams of getting proposed to. But Kate, if we're married, it strengthens our position. Shows Emma has a stable home with 2 parents. Makes it much harder for the Hartfields to win. So this would be a marriage of convenience for legal protection?" Ethan looked at her. At this woman he'd fallen in love with over freezing nights and shared work and quiet moments by the fire. "No, it would be real. Everything else we've been building, that's real too. I love you, Kate Morrison. I want you to be my wife. Not just for legal protection. For real. For always." Kate's eyes filled with tears. You're sure because if we do this, there's no going back. You'd be taking on not just me, but 3 children, one of whom might be taken away despite everything we do. I'm taking on a family. That's what I'm doing, and yes, I'm sure. He pulled her close. Marry me, Kate, not because we have to, because I want to, because I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you and those kids. Kate pressed her face against his chest. He felt her tears soak through his shirt. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. They stood there in the cold, holding each other, while their children watched from the windows, and the future spread out uncertain and terrifying and full of possibility. 2 weeks later, they stood in front of Reverend Matthews in Silver Ridge, with the children as witnesses. Kate wore her best dress. Ethan wore the vest she'd made him. Their hands were joined. Do you, Ethan Blackwood, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Ethan looked at Kate, at her face that had become dear to him, at the strength and courage and love he saw there. I do. And do you, Catherine Morrison, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Kate's voice was steady. Certain. I do. They were married, legally, officially, for real in all the ways that mattered. After the ceremony, Benjamin approached Ethan carefully. Can I call you Pa now, if that's okay? Ethan's throat went tight. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Benjamin grinned and threw his arms around him. Thomas and Emma followed immediately. Pa, they chorused, and Ethan held all 3 children while Kate watched with tears streaming down her face. A family. They were a family now, legal and real and whole. That night, after the children were asleep, Ethan and Kate stood on the porch looking at the stars. We're going to win this, Ethan said quietly. The Hartfields might have money and lawyers, but we have love and we have each other. That has to count for something. I hope so. Kate leaned against him. I hope so. But the fear was still there, in both of them, because the fight was just beginning and no one knew how it would end. The letter came 3 days after the wedding. Not a request this time, a notification. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Hartfield would be arriving at the Blackwood Ranch on February 15th to assess the living conditions of Emma Morrison. Legal proceedings would follow. Kate read it with shaking hands. February 15th was less than 2 weeks away. They're really coming, she whispered. They're going to try to take her. Ethan took the letter from her hands, read it again looking for any angle they could use. Found nothing helpful, just cold legal language that made his daughter sound like property to be assessed and claimed. His daughter. Somewhere over the past 2 months, Emma had become that. Not by blood, by choice, by love, by the 1,000 small moments that made a family real. Let them come. His voice was hard, certain. Let them see what a real home looks like. Let them see a child who's loved and safe and happy. Then let them try to justify taking her away. But fear lived in Kate's eyes anyway. Fear that money and lawyers and blood rights would win over everything they'd built. The days before the 15th were strange, tense. Everyone trying to act normal while the threat hung over them like a storm waiting to break. The children knew something was wrong. Emma especially. She'd started clinging to Kate again, having nightmares, asking if they were going to have to leave. No, baby, Kate told her over and over. We're not leaving. This is our home now. Papa Ethan won't let anyone take us away. And Ethan would reinforce it every time. That's right. You're my daughter now, legal and official. No one's taking you anywhere. He meant it too. Would fight with everything he had. But the fear was there anyway. Fear that it wouldn't be enough. Benjamin had gone quiet, watchful. The boy was smart enough to understand what was happening, old enough to remember what it felt like to be powerless. He'd taken to staying close to Emma, protecting her the only way he knew how. Thomas threw himself into his work with the chickens, spending hours in the coop, talking to them, finding comfort in the simple routine of caring for something that depended on him. The house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting, dreading. February 14th arrived clear and bitter cold. Tomorrow the Hartfields would come. Tomorrow everything would change one way or another. That night Ethan found Kate in Emma's room, just sitting beside the bed watching their daughter sleep. Her face was wet with tears she wasn't bothering to hide anymore. He sat beside her, put his arm around her, let her lean against him while fear tried to strangle hope. I can't lose her, Kate whispered. Ethan, I can't. She's my baby. I've raised her since she could barely walk. I've been there for every fever, every nightmare, every scraped knee. I'm her mother, not some stranger who happens to share her blood. I know. What if the judge doesn't see it that way? What if blood is all that matters to them? Then we appeal. We fight harder. We don't stop fighting until we win. Kate turned to look at him. Why are you doing this? Really, you could have just let us go when the letter came. Stayed out of it. Kept your life simple and uncomplicated. Ethan looked at Emma sleeping peacefully. At this little girl who called him Papa with complete trust, who brought him flowers from the garden, who asked him to read her stories at bedtime. Because she's mine now too. Because you're all mine. And I protect what's mine. Always. He turned to face Kate fully. When Rebecca died, I thought my life was over. Thought I'd never feel anything again except grief and guilt. Then you showed up with 3 half-frozen children, and somehow you brought me back to life. Taught me how to care about something again. How to hope. How to love. His voice roughened. If someone tries to take that away, tries to hurt you or these kids, they're going to find out exactly how far I'm willing to go. And Kate, I'm willing to go all the way. Kate kissed him then, soft and desperate and full of all the fear and love and hope they were both carrying. When they broke apart, her eyes were still wet, but also fierce. Then we fight. We fight. They sat together in Emma's room until late into the night, drawing strength from each other, preparing for battle. February 15th dawned gray and threatening snow. Ethan was up before the sun, restless energy making it impossible to sleep. He did the morning chores quickly, checked on the cattle, made sure everything looked as prosperous and well-maintained as possible. This was more than his home now. It was evidence, proof that he could provide for a family, that Emma would have a good life here. By mid-morning, the house was spotless. Kate had cleaned everything that could be cleaned. The children were dressed in their best clothes, hair-combed, faces scrubbed, trying to look like the happy, well-cared-for family they actually were. The riders appeared just after noon, 2 horses picking their way carefully through the snow. As they got closer, Ethan could make out details. Expensive coats, fine horses. The bearing of people who'd never done a day of hard work in their lives, city people, Eastern people. The kind who thought money and breeding made them superior to folks who worked with their hands. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. These were the people who wanted to take Emma, wanted to uproot her from the only mother she'd ever known because of some legal technicality about blood. He stepped out onto the porch. Kate came to stand beside him, her hand finding his and gripping tight. The children stayed inside as instructed, watching through the window. The riders stopped in front of the house. The man dismounted first, then helped the woman down with elaborate courtesy. They were both in their 50s, Ethan guessed. Well-dressed, well-fed, the kind of prosperity that came from inherited money, not earned sweat. Mr. Blackwood, the man's voice was clipped, Eastern accent. I'm Thomas Hartfield. This is my wife, Eleanor. We're here to discuss the matter of Emma Morrison. Emma Blackwood, Ethan corrected quietly. She's my daughter now, legal and adopted. Thomas Hartfield's expression didn't change. Nevertheless, we have business to discuss. Then let's discuss it out here. You're not welcome in my home. Eleanor Hartfield stepped forward. Her face was harder than her husband's, less willing to pretend courtesy. Mr. Blackwood, we understand you've recently married the child's guardian, a convenient arrangement given the circumstances. I married the woman I love. The circumstances have nothing to do with it. Of course. Eleanor's tone made it clear she didn't believe him. Regardless, Emma is blood relation to us. Her biological mother was my sister. Before she died, she expressed wishes that we raise the child should anything happen to her. And where were you 4 years ago when that happened? Kate's voice cut in hard and controlled. Where were you when Emma was 18 months old and needed a mother when she was learning to walk and talk and needed family? You didn't want her then. You don't get to want her now. Eleanor's face flushed. We weren't aware of her existence until recently. My sister and I had been estranged. By the time we learned of Emma, you'd already fled Missouri with her. I didn't flee. I moved to give my children a better life. A better life? Eleanor looked around at the ranch, the simple buildings, the rough country. Her expression made it clear what she thought of it all. This is hardly suitable for raising a young lady. Emma deserves education, culture, opportunities beyond what this frontier can provide. Emma deserves a mother who loves her, Kate shot back, which she has, and a father who died protecting her, which she also has. What can you offer that matters more than that? Stability, security, a proper upbringing. Thomas Hartfield's voice was firm. Mrs. Blackwood, we understand you've done your best, but you must see that we can offer Emma advantages you simply cannot. Ethan had heard enough. Let me make something clear. Emma is happy here. She's healthy. She's loved. She has brothers who protect her and parents who'd walk through fire for her. You want to argue that's not good enough, then you take it to court. But you're not stepping foot in my house. You're not going near that little girl. Not today. This is highly irregular, Thomas started. I don't care. You came here to assess living conditions. Fine, you can see we have a solid home, good land, enough to provide for our family. You want more than that, get a court order. Eleanor's eyes had gone cold. We will. And Mr. Blackwood, when we do, you'll find that the courts favor blood relations over convenient marriages. Emma belongs with us, and we will have her. She turned to her husband. Thomas, we're leaving. Our lawyers will handle this from here. They mounted their horses without another word, rode away with the same careful precision they'd arrived with, never looking back. When they were out of sight, Kate's legs gave out. Ethan caught her before she hit the porch, lowered her gently to sit on the steps. They're going to take her, Kate said, her voice hollow. Did you see Eleanor's face? She's not going to give up. She'll use every resource she has until she wins. Then we'll use everything we have too. We don't have anything. We're just ranchers trying to survive. They have money, lawyers, influence. How do we fight that? Ethan knelt in front of her, made her look at him. We fight with the truth. We fight with witnesses who will testify that Emma is loved and cared for. We fight with the fact that for 4 years you've been the only mother that child has known. And Kate, we fight because giving up isn't an option. The door opened behind them. Benjamin stood there, his face pale but determined. Pa, I heard what they said about taking Emma. You weren't supposed to be listening. I know, but I was. The boy came out onto the porch, sat down beside them. And I want you to know if they try to take her, I'll fight too. I'll tell any judge who'll listen that Emma belongs here, with us, with her real family. Ethan pulled the boy close. This child who'd had to grow up too fast, who carried too much weight on young shoulders, who was willing to stand up to adults and courts and the whole legal system to protect his sister. Thank you, son. She's my sister. That's what brothers do. Thomas appeared in the doorway next, then Emma. All of them drawn by the fear and tension they could feel even from inside. Emma ran to Kate, threw herself into her mother's arms. Mama, who were those people? Why did they make you cry? Kate held her daughter close, smoothed her hair with shaking hands. Just some people who don't understand what family means, baby. But it's okay. We're not going to let anyone take you away. I promise. It was a promise she had no guarantee she could keep, but she made it anyway. Because what else could a mother do that night after the children were finally asleep? Ethan and Kate sat at the kitchen table with James Harker's letters spread out before them, going over strategy, preparing for what was coming. The hearing is set for March 10th in Cheyenne, Ethan said. That gives us 3 weeks to prepare. Harker says we need witnesses, people who can testify to Emma's well-being, to your character as a mother. Who do we have? Grace Dawson will testify. She saw you that first day, saw what you were willing to do for your children. Reverend Matthews performed our wedding. He can speak to the legitimacy of our marriage. Some of the neighboring ranchers have seen the children, have seen how well cared for they are. Kate nodded slowly. What about Emma herself? Will they make her testify? Harker says probably not. She's too young. But he did say, Ethan hesitated. What? He said Benjamin might be called. He's old enough that a judge might listen to him, ask him questions about the home environment, about you, about how Emma's been treated. Kate's face went white. They'd put him on the stand, Make him testify against those people. He's 10 years old. I know, but Harker thinks it might help. A child testifying on behalf of a parent carries weight. I don't want to put that on him. Neither do I, but Kate, we might not have a choice. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of what they were facing settling over them like snow. Tell me something, Kate said finally. Tell me we're going to win this. Even if it's a lie, tell me we're going to win. Ethan took her hands, looked into her eyes. We're going to win, because losing isn't an option, because that little girl belongs here with us, because love matters more than blood, and because I'll spend every cent I have and fight until I have no fight left before I let anyone take her. You really mean that? Every word. Kate leaned forward and kissed him, soft and desperate and full of all the fear they were both carrying. When they broke apart, her eyes were wet but also determined. Then we fight. The next 3 weeks were a blur of preparation, gathering documents, meeting with witnesses, going over testimony with James Harker, making sure every detail of their case was as strong as possible. Benjamin asked to testify, said he wanted to help. Ethan tried to talk him out of it, not wanting to put that burden on a child. But the boy was insistent. Pa, I remember what it was like before Mama married Samuel. I remember being hungry and scared and not knowing if we'd be okay. And I remember Samuel taking us in. And then I remember him dying and everything going bad again. But now we're here, and we're good. We're a family. I need to tell that to the judge. Need to make sure he understands. How could Ethan say no to that, to a child willing to stand up in court and fight for his family? Okay, he said finally, if you're sure. I'm sure. March arrived with the first hints of spring, snow melting during the day, freezing again at night. The world caught between winter and something new, something hopeful. On March 9th, they left for Cheyenne. All of them. The children needed to be there even if they didn't testify. Needed to see their parents fighting for them and needed to know they mattered enough to fight for. The ride took 2 days. They stayed in a hotel in Cheyenne the night before the hearing. Kate couldn't sleep. Neither could Ethan. They lay in bed in the dark, holding each other, trying to find courage in the warmth of skin on skin. Whatever happens tomorrow, Kate whispered, I want you to know I love you, and I'm grateful for everything you've done for us, for choosing to stand with us even though you didn't have to. I had to. Ethan's voice was rough in the darkness. Because you're my family now. You. And family means everything. They made love then, gentle and desperate and full of all the fear and hope and love they couldn't quite put into words. Afterward, Kate cried quietly against his chest, and Ethan held her while his own eyes burned with tears he wouldn't let fall. Tomorrow would come. Tomorrow they'd face it. Together. The courtroom in Cheyenne was smaller than Ethan expected. Plain wooden benches, a raised platform for the judge, windows that let in harsh morning light, everything spare and functional and intimidating. The Hartfields sat on one side with their lawyer, expensive suits, confident bearing, looking like people who expected to win because they always won. Ethan and Kate sat on the other side with James Harker. Kate's hands were shaking. Ethan held them tight, trying to lend her his strength, trying to be strong enough for both of them. The children sat behind them, Benjamin between his younger siblings, watchful, protective, already too old for his years. Judge Marcus Webb entered and everyone stood. The judge was older than Ethan expected. White hair, weathered face, eyes that had seen too much human misery to be shocked by any of it. That might be good, might be bad. Hard to tell. Be seated. The judge's voice was gravelly, tired. We're here to determine custody of Emma Morrison, age 4. Counselor Whitmore, you represent the petitioners. The Hartfield's lawyer stood, smooth, polished, every inch the Eastern professional. Yes, Your Honor, my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Hartfield, are seeking custody of their niece Emma Morrison on the grounds that they are her closest blood relations and can provide superior care. And you oppose Mr. Harker, James Harker stood, less polished than Whitmore, but with a quiet confidence that came from knowing Western courts, knowing Western judges. Yes, Your Honor, my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Ethan Blackwood, oppose this petition on the grounds that Mrs. Blackwood has been Emma's mother in every meaningful sense for 4 years. Blood relation does not supersede the bonds of actual parenthood. Judge Webb nodded slowly. Proceed, Mr. Whitmore. What followed was brutal. Whitmore laid out the Hartfield case with surgical precision. Documentation showing Eleanor Hartfield's biological connection to Emma's birth mother. A letter supposedly from the birth mother expressing wishes that the Hartfields raise Emma if anything happened to her. Evidence of the Hartfield wealth and social position. Emphasis on the educational and cultural opportunities they could provide. Then he turned his attention to Kate and Ethan, pointed out that Kate had no legal adoption papers, that she'd fled Missouri with outstanding debts, that she'd been living with Ethan before their marriage, that the marriage itself seemed suspiciously timed to the Hartfield inquiry. Your Honor, Whitmore said smoothly, while we don't question Mrs. Blackwood's affection for the child, we must consider what's truly best for Emma's future. The Hartfields can offer stability, education, and opportunities that a struggling ranch in Wyoming territory simply cannot match. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Wanted to stand up. Wanted to shout that none of that mattered compared to love. But Harker had warned him. Stay quiet. Let the lawyer handle it. Outbursts would only hurt their case. When it was Harker's turn, he started with Grace Dawson. The older woman took the stand with calm dignity. Told the story of Kate coming into her store that first day. 3 starving children. A mother desperate but proud, asking for work, not charity. I've run that store 30 years, Grace said. I've seen a lot of people come through, good people and bad. And I'm telling you, Judge Kate Morrison is one of the good ones. She didn't abandon those children when things got hard. Didn't give up. She fought for them, kept them alive against odds that would have broken most folks. That's the kind of mother Emma has. Reverend Matthews testified next, spoke about the wedding, about the way Ethan and Kate looked at each other, the way the children clearly loved and trusted both of them. This is a real marriage, Your Honor, the Reverend said firmly, built on love and respect and commitment, not some legal convenience. I've been marrying people for 25 years. I know the difference. Then came the neighboring ranchers, 3 of them, all testifying to seeing Emma healthy and happy, well cared for, clearly loved. One of them, old Samuel Cooper, got visibly angry when Whitmore suggested the ranch wasn't fit for raising children. Fit? Cooper's voice rose. My children were raised on a ranch, my grandchildren too. Are you saying ranch life isn't good enough for a child that only city people know how to raise kids proper? That's the biggest load of horse manure I've heard in 50 years. Judge Webb had to bang his gavel to restore order. But Ethan saw something flicker in the old judge's eyes, something that might have been approval. When it was time for Kate to testify, she walked to the stand with her head high, hands steady. Ethan had never been more proud of her. Harker kept it simple, asked her to describe Emma's early life, the way Kate had taken her in as a baby, the years of care and love, the bond they'd built. Kate's voice was strong and clear. Emma was 18 months old when she came to me, still in diapers, still learning to walk. Her father, my late husband Samuel, asked me to love her as my own. And I have, every single day, through fevers and nightmares and scraped knees and bedtime stories, through teaching her letters and numbers and how to be kind, through all the thousands of small moments that make a mother and daughter. And Mr. Blackwood, Harker asked, how has he been with Emma? He's been wonderful, patient, kind. He reads to her at night, answers her endless questions, makes her feel safe. Emma calls him Papa, and she means it. He's her father in every way that matters. Then it was Whitmore's turn. He was less gentle. Mrs. Blackwood, you fled Missouri with unpaid debts. Is that correct? My husband died owing money, yes. And you took 3 children and fled rather than facing those obligations. I took my children and moved to keep them safe and fed. I've been paying back those debts, every cent I can spare. You lived with Mr. Blackwood for nearly 2 months before marrying him. As a widow living with a bachelor, some might find that improper. Kate's eyes flashed. I was his housekeeper. We had separate rooms. Everything was proper. And we married because we love each other, not because of any impropriety. Conveniently, shortly after receiving notice of the Hartfield inquiry. We married because we wanted to be a family, legal and official. The timing had nothing to do with convenience and everything to do with love. Whitmore tried to shake her, tried to make her seem desperate or opportunistic or unfit, but Kate held firm, answered every question with quiet dignity, never wavering, never breaking. When she stepped down, Ethan wanted to stand up and cheer. His wife had been magnificent. Then Harker called Benjamin. The boy walked to the stand looking small in the big courtroom. But when he sat down and looked at the judge, his voice was steady, clear, much older than his 10 years. State your name for the record, Harker said gently. Benjamin Morrison, I mean Blackwood. Benjamin Blackwood. And Emma is your sister? Yes, sir. Tell the judge about your life before coming to Wyoming, what it was like after your father died. Benjamin took a breath. It was hard. Mama worked 3 jobs, but it wasn't enough. We were always hungry, always cold. I had to take care of Thomas and Emma when Mama was working. Had to be the man because Papa was gone. His voice caught slightly, but he pushed on. I remember Emma crying because she was hungry and we didn't have food. Remember Thomas getting sick and we couldn't afford medicine. Remember Mama trying to hide that she was crying, but I could tell. And now, since coming to the ranch, now we're a family, for real. Mama doesn't have to work herself to death. Thomas got medicine when he needed it. Emma laughs all the time. We eat every day. We're warm, we're safe. And Pa, he teaches me things. Makes me feel like I can be just a kid sometimes instead of always having to be grown up. Your Pa being Mr. Blackwood? Yes, sir. He's my Pa now. He takes care of us, all of us. Whitmore stood for cross-examination, approached the boy with false gentleness. Benjamin, you are very loyal to your mother. That's admirable. But you must understand the Hartfields could give Emma opportunities you cannot. Education, culture, a life beyond this rough territory. Benjamin looked at him steadily. Emma doesn't need opportunities. She needs a mama who loves her. And she has one. The only one she's ever known. But the Hartfields are her blood family. Blood doesn't make family. Benjamin's voice was fierce now. Certain. Love does. Emma is my sister because I love her and she loves me. Not because we share the same mama and papa. And if you take her away from us, you'll be ripping apart a real family just because you think blood matters more than love. And that's wrong. The courtroom went silent. Even Whitmore seemed taken aback. Judge Webb was watching the boy with an unreadable expression. No further questions, Whitmore said finally. Benjamin stepped down and returned to his seat between Thomas and Emma. Emma immediately grabbed his hand and held tight. The testimonies continued, back and forth, building cases on both sides. By the time they broke for lunch, Ethan's head was pounding. No way to know which way the judge was leaning. No way to know if they'd done enough. During the lunch break, they huddled in a small room adjacent to the courthouse. Kate couldn't eat, just sat there staring at nothing while fear ate at her from the inside. You did good, Ethan told her quietly. All of you, especially you, Ben. You were brave up there. Did it help? Benjamin asked. Did I say the right things? You said perfect things, told the truth. That's all anyone could ask. But would truth be enough? That was the question none of them could answer. The afternoon session started with Eleanor Hartfield taking the stand. She was poised, elegant, everything Kate was not. And when Whitmore questioned her, she painted a picture of a child in need of rescue. Poor Emma stuck on a rough ranch with people who couldn't provide for her properly. Poor Emma without access to schools or culture or the finer things in life. We simply want to give our niece the life her mother would have wanted. Eleanor said, her voice dripping with false concern. The life she deserves, is that so wrong? But when Harker cross-examined, something shifted. Mrs. Hartfield, you say you want to give Emma the life her mother would have wanted, but you were estranged from your sister for years before her death. Is that correct? Eleanor's face tightened. Yes. In fact, you hadn't spoken to her in over a decade. Family disagreements happen. So you didn't know your sister was pregnant. Didn't know she died in childbirth. Didn't know Emma existed until recently. We've explained this. What I'm trying to understand, Mrs. Hartfield, is where you've been for the past 4 years. If Emma is so important to you, why didn't you search for her sooner? Why wait until now, when she's settled and happy to suddenly claim her? Eleanor had no good answer to that. fumbled through explanations about not knowing about family complications, about only recently learning the truth. But the damage was done. The question hung in the air. Why now, after Eleanor stepped down, there was a brief recess. When they reconvened, the judge looked tired, like he'd heard enough, seen enough, was ready to make a decision. But then Eleanor stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to say something, not as testimony, just as a person. Judge Webb looked surprised but nodded. Proceed. Eleanor walked to the front of the courtroom, stood there for a moment, seemingly gathering herself. When she spoke, her voice was different, less polished, more raw. I need to be honest with the court, with myself, with everyone here. She paused, looked at Kate. My sister died alone. We'd been estranged for over 10 years because of a stupid argument I can barely remember now. I wasn't there when she needed me. Wasn't there when she was pregnant and scared. Wasn't there when she died. Her voice cracked slightly. When I learned about Emma, I convinced myself that taking her would somehow make up for that, would let me be the aunt I should have been all along, would ease the guilt I carry every day about abandoning my sister. She turned to the judge. But I was wrong. Emma doesn't know me. She knows her mother, the woman who's raised her with love and sacrifice for 4 years. And watching Mrs. Blackwood testify today, watching her children defend her, I realized something. Family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. It's about being there day after day, year after year. And I wasn't there, Mrs. Blackwood was. The courtroom was dead silent. Even Whitmore looked shocked. I can't undo the past, Eleanor continued. Can't bring back my sister or erase the years I wasn't there for her. But I can do the right thing now. For Emma, for the family she actually has. She looked directly at Judge Webb. Your Honor, I'm withdrawing our petition. Emma belongs with her mother, with the Blackwoods. That's where she should stay. Kate made a sound, half sob, half gasp. Ethan grabbed her hand and held tight. Thomas Hartfield stood up, looking furious. Eleanor, what are you doing? We discussed this. We agreed. You agreed, Eleanor said quietly. I went along because I felt guilty. But this isn't about us. It's about a little girl who has a family, a real family, and we need to let her keep it. She turned to Kate. I'm sorry for everything, for the fear we put you through, for trying to take your daughter. If you're ever willing, I'd like to write to Emma sometimes. Get to know her from a distance, but only if you're comfortable with that. She's your daughter. That decision is yours. Kate couldn't speak, just nodded, tears streaming down her face. Judge Webb banged his gavel once. In light of the petitioner's withdrawal, this case is dismissed. Emma Morrison Blackwood will remain in the custody of her legal parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ethan Blackwood. Court is adjourned. For a moment, no one moved. Then Kate was up and running to where the children sat, grabbing Emma and holding her so tight the little girl squeaked. Benjamin and Thomas piled on, all of them crying and laughing and holding each other. Ethan stood more slowly, walked over to where they huddled together. His family, legal and official, and no one could take them away now. Ever. He put his arms around all of them. Kate looked up at him with a face full of joy and relief and love so intense it hurt to see. We won, she whispered. Ethan, we won. We won. They stood like that while the courtroom emptied around them. Just a family holding each other. Safe. Together. Home. Later, after they'd left the courthouse, after the paperwork was signed and everything was official, Leonor approached them on the street. Mrs. Blackwood, I meant what I said about writing to Emma, if that's acceptable. Kate looked at the older woman, at the guilt and grief and honest remorse in her face. Then she looked down at Emma, who was watching the exchange with curious eyes. Emma, this is your Aunt Eleanor, your birth mother's sister. Would you like to write letters to her sometimes? Get to know her. Emma considered this seriously, then nodded. Will you read them to me? I can't read yet. I'll read them to you, baby. Okay then, I can try. Eleanor's eyes got bright. Thank you, both of you. You're being far more gracious than I deserve. Everyone deserves a second chance, Kate said quietly. Someone once gave me one. I can do the same for you. They parted ways after that. The Hartfields heading back east, the Blackwoods heading home to Wyoming, to their ranch, to their life. The ride back took 3 days. They were in no hurry, just enjoyed being together, being a family with no threats hanging over them, no fears shadowing their joy. When they finally crested the last rise and saw the ranch spread out below, Kate started crying again. Happy tears this time, tears of relief and homecoming and peace. "We're home," she said softly. "We're home," Ethan agreed. The months that followed were good, better than good. The ranch prospered. Spring brought new calves. The garden flourished under Kate's care. The children grew and thrived. Letters came from Eleanor, carefully respectful, asking about Emma, but never presuming. Emma dictated responses that Kate wrote down. Building a bridge across the distance. The ranch prospered in ways Ethan hadn't dared hope, with Kate managing the household and Benjamin working like a seasoned hand they'd brought in the best calf crop in 5 years. By late spring, Ethan rode into town with a bank draft for $2,000. Marcus Cole looked genuinely surprised when Ethan laid it on his desk. "Paid in full," Ethan said simply. Marcus counted it twice, then extended his hand. "Never doubted you'd find a way, Blackwood. Caleb would be proud." The words sat warm in Ethan's chest all the way home. Summer turned to fall, fall to winter again, the cycle of seasons turning like it always did. But now the house was full of life, full of voices and laughter and the million small moments that made a family real. 1 year after that frozen day in the general store, when Kate had walked into Ethan's life, they stood together on the porch watching their children play in the snow. Benjamin teaching Thomas how to track, Emma making snow angels and demanding her brothers admire each one. "You're thinking hard," Kate said, leaning against Ethan's side. "Just remembering, a year ago I was alone, failing, giving up slowly on everything. Then you showed up and saved me. I think we saved each other." "Yeah, maybe we did." They watched the children in comfortable silence. Then Emma called out, "Papa, Mama, come help us build a snow fort." Ethan looked at Kate. She grinned. "Well, the children are calling." They went down the steps together, joined their children in the snow, built forts and threw snowballs and laughed until their sides hurt. A family, real and complete, and theirs forever. That night, after the children were finally in bed, exhausted and happy, Kate and Ethan sat by the fire, just being together, content. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd said no that day?" Kate asked. "If you'd turned us away like everyone else did?" "Sometimes, and it terrifies me, thinking about where you might have ended up, where I'd still be." "Alone." "Yeah, alone, dead inside even if my body kept moving." Kate took his hand. "I'm glad you said yes." "So am I. Best decision I ever made." She kissed him softly. "I love you, Ethan Blackwood. Thank you for giving us a home, for being the father my children needed, for fighting for us when we couldn't fight for ourselves. I love you too, and Kate, you don't have to thank me. This is my family. Protecting you, taking care of you, that's not a burden. It's a privilege." They sat together as the fire burned low. Outside, the Wyoming winter held the land in its grip. But inside, there was warmth. There was love. There was home. A year ago, Ethan Blackwood had been a man waiting to die, a ghost haunting his own life. Now he was a husband, a father, a man with purpose and family and a future worth building. It had started with 3 desperate people in a frozen general store, a woman who refused to give up, 3 children who needed a chance, and a broken man who found the courage to say yes. That yes had changed everything, had built a family from broken pieces, had proved that love mattered more than blood. That courage mattered more than circumstance. That home wasn't a place but the people you chose to stand with through whatever came. Ethan looked at his wife, at the warm house around them, at the life they'd built together, and knew bone deep that he'd finally found what Rebecca would have wanted for him. Not to stop living when she died, but to live fully, to love again, to build something beautiful from the ashes of grief. "Thank you," he said quietly to the empty air, to Rebecca's memory, to the love he'd had and the love he had now, to the past that shaped him and the future he was building. "Thank you for everything." He thought of Caleb, 2 buried beside Rebecca on that hill. 2 people who'd taught him what family meant. 2 people whose legacy lived on in the life he was building. Kate looked at him questioningly, but he just smiled and pulled her closer. Some conversations were private. Some gratitudes were meant for ghosts and memories and the quiet spaces where the past and present met. They went to bed that night wrapped in each other's arms, fell asleep to the sound of their children breathing in nearby rooms, woke to coffee brewing and small voices arguing over whose turn it was to collect eggs. Life. Real messy, beautiful life. And Ethan Blackwood wouldn't trade a single moment of it for anything.